I guess I can start with my childhood. Um, I was abused as a child a lot. Um, I got physically abused from my mom. Um, wooden spoons over the face, stuff like that, broken over my legs and stuff like that. My father, he left when I was about 2. He he was battling his own addictions, and he was starting recovery when I was very young. My mom was very involved in her alcoholism, and she was a very belligerent drunk sometimes. I lived in a neighborhood where I was the only white kid, and so I would get beat up on the way to or from school at least once a week, usually by more than one. And then I had to pick which way I was going to go home after school. One route was the easy road. I could get home, no problem. There wasn't so much riffraff. But I knew that if I went home that way, that I probably wouldn't see my mom, because she was at the bar on the other route, where I would get beat up about half the time that I walked down there. So I would take beatings to be able to see my mom. Sometimes she had a babysitter, sometimes she wouldn't. The times that she didn't have a babysitter for me, I was had every light on in the house. She was out at the bar until I don't know when, with knives hidden under cushions, afraid that somebody was going to come in and get me. The nights that I did have a babysitter, I got raped every night. So that happened until about 4th grade. For 5th grade, I moved down to a really rough neighborhood in Jacksonville, Florida, where again I was the only white kid, and again I would get beat up. And she found a babysitter for me, but this time I was so conditioned to that type of activity that I came onto this babysitter and ended up having sex with that babysitter too. Then we moved to Ponte Vedra, where I didn't fit in there either, because everybody around me was extraordinarily rich and we lived in a trailer. So again, I got bullied, not beat up as much, but definitely got beat up. And then I went to high school. I moved in finally with my dad. He lived in Newburyport. I grew up on Plum Island through high school, which sounds like a great thing. But I didn't fit in there either, because that was also really a rich town, and I was Florida boy with long hair, and so I joined the football team thinking I'm gonna make some friends and figure this thing out. Well, I got beat up there too, and then I joined the baseball team thinking if I just keep at it, but I didn't fit in there either, and eventually I quit the baseball team my freshman year, because I was getting thrown in lockers and beat up in the hallway, and I took the catcher's position from one of the good old boys, and that wasn't going to stand. So I said, all right, fine. So I was kind of an outsider through high school. During my high school, where I really was hoping to see my father a lot more, he was working 90, 100 hours a week, because when he was in his addictions, he racked up a big tax bill, and he was working really hard to pay it off so he didn't have to go to jail. Along with that, he was really active in his recovery program, because he needed to be, because he was kind of still in the first decade of recovery, and he was working real hard to maintain it. So, but I got bullied a lot. My dad wasn't around very much. And then went to college for a year in Hartford, where I found alcohol. That was the first time I started drinking. Didn't agree with me. Every time I would drink, I would get sick. So what did I do? I figured I would take a crash course in drinking. I joined the rugby team. So where we were drinking, we'd have there's an A squad and the B squad. It was the B squad. And the B squad, they made us chug 2 beers at halftime. It was a serious drinking club that sometimes played rugby, And I started smoking a lot of weed in college too. So clearly my grades didn't maintain my scholarships, and I didn't make it past a year. Now, I'm going to backtrack a little bit to high school. My first few psychedelic experiences. Now, my first one was a kind of an accident. I mean, I took it myself, so there was consent, but it was kind of an accident. My friends had some tickets to a concert, and they didn't have a ride. No, I had this van that it was a camper van with a bed in the back, and like, I didn't know what I had when I had it. Like, I just thought, oh, this big old thing, but yeah, it's got a bed in the back. Everybody thinks it's cool, but like, it's a pain to drive, whatever. But they said, hey, we're going to this concert. We'll give you a ticket if you'll just drive us. I'm like, who is it? Well, they told me, and I'm like, well, I've heard of one song. I mean, they're like, come on, it'll be fun. We're just going to hang out. I'm like, okay, fine. So I go down there, we're in the parking lot, and this guy comes by, and he has mescaline. So he sells some mescaline to my friends, and then he gets up and leaves. Well, getting up off the bed, there's a little pile of little tiny yellow things that are tiny. And so I picked them up, and I'm like, this must be what they were just buying. How many of these am I supposed to eat? Oh, God. And like, just one. And so, yeah, I was deep in mescaline when I went into the show. And this was the first time I heard Comfortably Numb, Wish You Were Here, played by Pink Floyd in Foxborough. Blew my mind with giant lasers. It was incredible. It lit my fire for live music, and I have been a serious addict of live music since then. I love it a lot. So my second experience was with LSD, and there's some hijinks that happened over the night, but there's this one moment that still comes back to me to this day. I was with my friends, and I wish that I could kind of recapture the thought process that was going through. I just remember the words that I said. And I said, we were all standing around, and I said, I got it, guys, I got it. Everything is it. And they're like, yeah. Wait, what did you just say? But it made sense. It really, like, and now, like, I get it, but I don't get the thought process in the mind, so I'm really curious if I'm going to find that. Anyway, dropped out of college, or flunked out of college, went to Florida, dabbled in a few other drugs, got married. Started buying houses like crazy. I had bought a dozen of them. I bought an apartment complex and rebuilt the whole thing myself, piece by piece, like with my own hands, with no education on it. I just learned on the job, built 4,500 square feet of interior kitchens, bathrooms, the whole thing, just built it myself. And I mean, I had some help, but I did 90% of the work. I was there after my regular job, 50, 60 hours a week, working on it. Built up a really good retirement account, had all these houses, had all this stuff, had a wife. At this point, I had a couple kids. And one day I had this thought, and the thought was, man, all this is a house of cards. It's all gonna come down. And I couldn't shake it after that. After that moment, I had no idea what that meant. I just couldn't shake it. What I know now is it wasn't my path. I was doing a really good job. And I mean, I was doing an exceptional job, but it wasn't my path. I didn't love it. Didn't make sense to me. It was just a way to make money. And it did. It came crashing down. My marriage fell apart. We got separated, and that's where I dove into coke. So I started, I was horribly upset because we were separated, and I was at my house, and I called up my friend, and I said, man, this is so I forget the words, but this is awful. I feel awful. He's like, I got you. He comes over and he plopped an ounce of cocaine down on the table, and he says, all right, let's cook this up and smoke it. So that started my crack habit. So I was an addict, a pretty low bottom addict, a little bit of shooting up, but mostly smoking it. And then I got arrested a few times, a couple possession charges, some other stuff. I ended up getting out of all of it because I took a recovery program, which I didn't really take seriously, but I sucked it up right after my youngest daughter got diagnosed with leukemia, and I said, okay, my kids need me, my daughter really needs me, let's clean it up for a little while. let's just clean it up and just like be a decent human being. You know, you got this, they need you, like do this. So I did. Finally made it through this recovery program. So the only thing that I ended up with all that stuff was one misdemeanor, year of probation, which they terminated after 6 months for doing everything right. And then after my daughter got cured of her leukemia, I was going through a tough time, and with a girlfriend, a longtime girlfriend, and also my father, who had been like my hero my whole life, even though he was absentee for so much. I had a falling out with him because I realized I chased him around the country and he never came to my house or to see me in my place, even though he had a conference that he was attending 40 miles away from my house, and he lived still in Newburyport. He came all the way down there, 35 minutes away from my house, and didn't visit my kids. And I was like, what is that? He reacted very badly, so that was it. We weren't on speaking terms for years. And it just grinded on me. It was a daily resentment. And so I went back to cocaine, and I started smoking a lot of it. Eventually got into some meth and started shooting that up. And I got really scared because I could see the insanity creeping into me. I could feel it. I you know, like there was moments when I was getting high on meth inside my house, walking around with a loaded AR-15, hearing voices outside of my house, about to open fire. Really, really scary stuff. I've been in trap houses with horrible, horrible things going on, like really like traumatic stuff, really horrible stuff. And I went to my mom, because my mom at this point knew very, very well that I was having problems. And so I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast. He talked about ayahuasca being a cure for addiction. So I looked into it, and it was in Peru. It was like $2,000 or $3,000. So my mom was going to take a mortgage out on her house to be able to send me, because I burned through all my money and any other money that I could get my hands on because I was an addict. I was stealing from my family, okay? That kind of addict. And my son knew that I was also in a bad way too, because for 2 years on the way down this path, he was a sophomore and a junior in high school, and he was living with me. So I would disappear for a night and come back at like 4 o'clock in the morning. He had been up all night worried about me, and I never knew this until afterwards. So he, at 14, opened up an auto detailing business because he wanted to go to Spain for a foreign exchange program. And he knew he had to raise a certain amount of money, and he was a couple $1,000s short, so he put together a banquet where he was going to serve arroz con pollo to a bunch of people. He went door to door selling tickets to make that extra couple $1,000, and he did it. So he was going to fly to Spain for 7 weeks. 2 days before he went to go fly to Spain, I started off on a 3-day binge. So if you do the math, I left him when I was supposed to take him to the airport. I was supposed to drive him to the airport where he went to fly off in Spain. That's this date, just written right here. This is Semicolon. If you don't know what Project Semicolon is, take a look at it. It's very interesting. It's about, the theory behind it is, or the basis behind it is that when an author writes a sentence, they could end the sentence with a period, or they can put a semicolon in it and continue it in a different direction. That's what Project Semicolon is. It's for suicide awareness, addiction awareness, and just generally, you know, when people are in a bad way and they need help, they can change their direction, change their life. So my mom took him to the airport, and I have this stunning picture of him holding onto his iPad, kind of looking back, sort of excited but like scared. It says everything. I still look at it with pride because he thought I was dead. he had no idea where I was. He didn't know if they were calling hospitals, they were calling, jails, they were calling people that knew me. My phone was long since dead, and I never turned it back on because I knew what was happening and I didn't want to face it. So he went to Spain, ran with the Bulls, studied, he was 16 years old, running around Spain for 7 weeks with a backpack. I'm really proud of him. He had some great adventures. Around that time, that's when I found Joe Rogan's podcast and heard about ayahuasca. Again, I know I heard it years ago, but it was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go and go trip this cool thing down there someday. And then it just went away. So I talked to my mom about it. She was gonna mortgage her house to send me there. And when my son came back and I let him in on what was going on, he did some research and he found this place in Florida. He says, Dad, there's one an hour and 45 minutes from here where it's totally legal. And I said, all right, I'm in, sign me up. And he says, I'm in too, I'm gonna support you. So we had to wait till he was 18, which was about a couple of months. And we went down there and I had my first experience. So at this point, I still wasn't talking to my father, daily resentment. And my first night I drank, I was seeing all kinds of visions, but I didn't really know how to work with the medicine. I didn't understand what I was seeing, but I was just ready for anything. Anything. I thought I was just gonna drink this stuff and be cured of my addiction. Now, I have to say, ayahuasca is not a one-trick pony. You don't just drink it once and the world is perfect. It's not, it doesn't work that way. But it is tremendously effective. So during this journey, because you go back and forth to the bathroom between having to urinate and having to purge from the other direction quite a few times, okay? And one of the times I was washing my hands and I looked up and I saw a face. And that was my face, but half my face. The other half was my father's face. It was kind of an age that was kind of, an average age of the two of us, an aggregate age. But it was a demon. I was looking in the face of a demon. It was part me and part my father. And it wasn't frightening, but it was disturbing. It was really disturbing. And I kind of observed it for a few minutes and went back to my mat, finished out my journey, didn't have a purge from my mouth, which I was proud of and happy about. Later I learned that purge is really awesome. So the next morning we have integration. Integration is where we talk about our experience with all the other people that also journeyed with us. And when I was talking about it, I just started bawling my eyes out in front of people. Now I don't cry, and I definitely don't cry in front of people, but it was full waterworks, and I was taken aside by one of the staff who was very helpful, helped me put some things into perspective. The next day, relaxed and kind of excited for the next chapter. When I drank, I had more visions, a little bit stronger, because I took an extra tablespoon that time. And then my purge came. And when my purge came, I avoided the mirror up to this point that night because I didn't want to see that again. And when my purge came, it was such an energetic emptying of negativity. And when it came out, I could see, out of my purge, I could see, what anger looked like. I could see what resentment was. I could see what pain, visual representations of these things. It was this black sludge that came out. I hadn't eaten very much for 8 hours. The buckets are about this big. It's like a wastebasket. I filled about this much of it. I have no idea where it came from because I hadn't eaten, 2 meals ago, When it hit the bucket, I felt the ground move. It was almost like a liquid earthquake type of effect. And when you're in the medicine, a lot of times your legs are not working that well. I popped up and right after I heard a voice in my head that said, go meet your dad. And it was my voice, but it didn't come from me. And I ran to the mirror. And there was just this yellow light that came from nowhere because I was inside a bathroom and there's no light. There's just little, like candles a couple of places because you have to keep the light out. Ear to ear smiling, tears pouring down my face, telling the man in the mirror that I love you. And I didn't use for about 8 weeks after that. That was the beginning of my recovery, and that kicked it off. I fell back into the depths, and somebody says, "Hey, I'll pay for a weekend. I know you don't have the money." I went there, and I just stayed there for a year. I literally stayed at the church for a year. I helped with cleaning buckets. I scrubbed thousands of buckets and wiped up thousands of purge piles and learned how to administer rapé and learned how to talk with people about their experience where they could integrate these ideas. And through helping them, my emotions came back. I didn't realize what it was like to live with emotions because I suppressed them so much. Because I think back when I was getting abused, I realized just shut off your emotions and you don't have to hurt. And so they started to come back. I started to feel compassion and joy and love for myself, love for the blades of grass that I was walking around in and every drop of water that I drank. And I just dove right into a new lifestyle. Now, I'm not a healer, but I do work very closely with this medicine, and I have for some time. And I do it because of the people that I see having awakenings. I'm so grateful to be able to witness that kind of stuff. I'm stunned. Every single time, it's after thousands of people, it still hasn't gotten old. It doesn't have all the answers, but it sure does have a lot of lessons, It taught me a lot, one journey I saw the visual representation of fear, and I just sat with it, and I observed it for about 2 hours. I just watched this box of black Rubik's thing that was fear, and it crept in, and as long as I didn't react to it, the power went away. And that taught me how to live my life. I learned how to trust people and how to identify when I shouldn't. So I don't walk around paranoid, because I have some paranoid tendencies sometimes. I can honestly say that if I hadn't found this medicine in this community, which is a beautiful community, I know that my life would have been significantly different, but I find it kind of likely that I wouldn't be alive. Because I took on the abuse from my childhood, and then started abusing myself with it by drinking my way out of college, by doing a job that I didn't like, by marrying somebody who wasn't right for me, by smoking crack and shooting meth, and the medicine showed me that I just picked up a habit of abuse and just turned it on myself. And she freed me of that. I got so much love for the community and so much love for this medicine that, I owe my life to it.